This is really important for chiropractors to understand is when you make an adjustment, you're actually firing off the brain. The brain is getting, basically it's getting access to all those neurological circuits that were shut down because of stress or because of trauma or because of negative thinking. At that moment, the moment you make that adjustment, their brain lights up. We've seen videos of this and live stream readings with the NeuroInfinity device that will blow you away. If Dr. Barwell was here, he would show you slide after slide of before and after adjustments, what happens with the brain. I didn't want to bore you too much with that, but you can see that online if you look him up. There's some of them online, but most chiropractors that I talk with don't realize the extent of that adjustment, what it does. They know it's powerful and they believe it because they have that chiropractic philosophy, but in physical science we can prove it, and that's where Hygiene Havoc comes in, so I'm going to share some of that with you. But I also wanted to share with you how photobiomodulation works. This is a chiropractor. His name is Dr. Brandon Crawford. He's out of Dallas, and he has a laser company, so he can afford all those lasers, right? So this guy and I tried to find the other picture, this guy that's in the wheelchair, through chiropractic care, BrainTap, and the lasers, this guy was told he would never walk again. They have a video of him online. I meant to get it before I got here, but I couldn't find it this morning when I was looking. But if you follow Brandon Crawford at Instagram, you'll see some of the miracles this guy's creating in his chiropractic office in Dallas by doing adjustments and using light, especially laser light, along with what's going on. This is how he's working with the kids with ADD and ADHD. He puts the laser there. So even though we're using light, if you as a doctor feel like you need more energy in that area, more light, whatever's going on, you can also use lasers. And he's a very good guy. He'd be a good guy for you to talk to with your traumatic brain injury stuff, because he's with the group, the Ian Afner group, the group that gave me the Lifetime Achievement Award. So they do all their work, and then they usually end it with light therapy, some type of light therapy to get everything to hold a little bit better. So I talked about this earlier, but 70% of the nervous system is above C1. So we always call this the above C1 adjustment. So because we all talk about it, right? Traumas, thoughts, and toxins, but what are you really doing for the thought part of it? So I'm not going to talk that much about it, but just know that that's the other part of the equation, because I'm going to talk more about the science and what's going on, but just know that when somebody asked me during the break, they said, we have our patients rest for 5-6 minutes after the adjustment. That's really good, but they're still with their own thinking. So think about their best thinking brought them in to see you, but their best thinking probably isn't going to help them out because their best thinking got them into the situation they were in. So we need to upgrade their thinking, and we only use positive psychology. There's been a lot of evidence that shows that negative conditioning doesn't work. And I'm a prime example. I went to Catholic school. So, we were told what not to do. We thought that was a checklist, of things to do. When there's 6 boys in your family, you figure out how to get in trouble. So, when you tell somebody what to do instead of what not to do, it works much better. For instance, if I asked you in this room to gather up all your willpower, because I'm going to ask you in a moment not to do something. If you had all that willpower, and I ask you not to think of a dancing pink elephant, what happens? Right, it's the first thing you think of because our brain doesn't process a negative. So, when they go to their medical doctor and he says, don't do this, don't do that, and they wonder why they go out and they do it, it's because it's an embedded command, actually, to go out and do it. Because the brain will do whatever it processes through the visual field more than it will through the auditory field. The old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So that picture is really important. These are your 2 heroes I talked about earlier that I think everyone should become more familiar with. Hygiene Havoc's above, but she's coming over here, and they're going to be doing a lot of work with chiropractic here, but the university's starting to incorporate it. It's one of the state universities, and that's Dr. Barwell. He's recently retired, but he's still available, and his technology is still available through Clint Steele, who runs NeuroInfinity. So those are a couple places I think you could go look for a lot more information. Dr. Crawford, Dr. Barwell, and Dr. Havoc, Hygiene Havoc. Those are some really good ways to do it. So also, these 2, when you look over, I should go back. This neurologically based chiropractic, people were asking, what's the protocol? We have created 7 sessions based on Hygiene Havoc and Dr. Barwell's knowledge, because I'm not a chiropractor, but I've been around chiropractors for 35 years. They told me the languaging to use. So when you bring your patient in, they put them on it, it's patient education. The first 7 sessions, they put it on, and they get educated about the nervous system, why these two are working together, and why it's so important that they stay with the doctor. Because as I said earlier, with people coming in, the biggest problem with having a pain practice is people believe once they're out of pain, they're fixed. Pain is the last thing to show up and the first thing to leave, so it's only the beginning. You know, we have a saying, there is no there, so you never finish this. You know, when somebody says, how often do you have to brain tap? I always say, how often do you get stressed? You have to have some way to mitigate that stress response. It doesn't have to be brain tap. You could do yoga, like I said, Tai Chi, whatever you find that's healthy and can get that stress out of your body. Because if not, it's just going to keep collecting. That stress is going to keep collecting in your system. Now, we talked about frequency following response. The ocean is at 10 hertz frequency. The mountains at 7.8 hertz frequency. And then this is where most people live. This is the beta brain, 18 plus cycles per second. You know, I had a friend that was helping us when I live in North Carolina now, but I was living in California. I escaped. And I was living up in Danville, which is outside of San Francisco, and it's farm country there, so it's a little bit more rural and nice. And we went to New York City, and one of the women that was helping us wanted to come. She'd never been to New York. She ran a horse farm, so she was always out in nature and relaxing. She didn't last one day in New York. She got neurologically sick because of all the stimulation. You know, they actually say that if we could take our grandparents, put them in the middle of Times Square, they'd die of neuroshock because our senses are assaulted at that point. So
Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, Crocodile Dundee, yeah. I didn't know that. Did he do that in the movie?
What's that?
Did he have a problem in the movie being in the city or something?
Yeah, good.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Wouldn't you?
You know the movie?
Yeah. So I know the movie, but I should rewatch that again because there's always a reason to watch that again. So that's a good one. So one of the things that neuroscience has proven that light therapy that I like is, you know, when you look at people right now, we're in really a pandemic of depression, anxiety. There's more suicides right now than ever before. It's crazy. I mean, what's happening in our schools? Children are killing themselves at accelerated rates. And it's, you know, when you're inside, there's something that they used to call it SAD or seasonal affective disorder. People aren't getting the light. And the most important light for us as humans is the light of the sun in the morning and at night. In fact, they've done research where people have done what they call sun gazing, and they actually have reset the gut biome by looking at the sun. And so when we did our research, the light that's most important to the body is red and blue light. So it could be anywhere from 470 nanometer light all the way up to 810, 820 nanometer light, which is infrared, but our body loves that. Now there's a whole lot more spectrum than that, but that's the spectrum in which our healing light. So at night, of course, less of the lower frequencies, more of the higher frequencies, so your brain knows to go to sleep. Because as we cycle through, our body is turned on and turned off from the light from the sun. It tells our hormones what to do. So it's really important. And this is something that it doesn't have to, we also have nasal lights. I don't know if you've ever seen those. If you stay later and you want to see them, I have one in my bag because I travel with it. It's a little LED light you put in your nose, and it shines light into your brain. And Lou Lim, the guy who invented it, he's done a lot of work with Harvard as well. And we did a lot of work with him. And when he invented that, I said, hey, I want that for me. So when I travel, when I'm doing my emails, sitting in front of the computer in the morning, I can just put that in and, you know, be doing light therapy at the same time. So it's another way to get light into the brain. And he's got really good studies as well with light in dementia and Alzheimer's. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but not specifically about that product, but about just how that works. Now, this is the study that I told you about with the group in Provo, Utah. If you get the slides, you can actually go to that link up there and you can watch the video. I'm not going to play it right here, but it says, I've never seen anything that works so well, says expert about addiction therapy. This wasn't just BrainTap there. They were using, this is the study we did with the nutrients into the brain. While they're relaxed in that parasympathetic state, they were able to absorb that nutrients. I don't know, in the state of Maryland, are you able to do IV drips as chiropractors? Okay, so this doesn't make any sense then. So I didn't realize that. A lot of chiropractors around the country are opening up IV clinics to do.
Well, they can open them up, but I think they have to have like a nurse practitioner.
Oh.
I mean, you could own one. I just think you have to have a nurse practitioner because we do have some in the state owned by chiropractors.
Yeah, this is the big thing right now. It's like moving across the country like wildfire. And a lot of doctors, now you can get a panel, you can do a blood test, find specifically the cocktail, the nutritional cocktail that you need, and then you can come in for therapy. And it's another way to do it. I'm not the expert at that. You'd have to find out who that is, but we work with them to put BrainTap into it. Fusion Health has 300 clinics, and we're in all those clinics doing BrainTap at the same time. So neuroplasticity, first we're going to tell you about light, sound, and vibration and how this creates neuroplasticity. So we're going to talk also about brain waves and how that works, brainwave entrainment. We're always in training. So when you walk into a room, your brain will evaluate the situation and it will entrain your frequency to that. That's why it's not just in the 70s when people say, I like your vibe. You know, we actually have a vibe. We know if that person, and actually there was a really good book by Gladwell Maxwell, that I think that's his name. He wrote a book called Blink. If you've, anybody ever? Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell. I had it backwards. Yeah. So, but his book is really cool because what they showed was your first impression is usually right. Like when you don't like somebody, I've been accused of being too positive. My nickname's Dr. Positive. So I can't hire people at our clinic or in our business because I always hire on potential instead of on reality. Because you have to have that kind of, you have to be a little bit to see you got to know the dark side as well as the light side or whatever. So it's really important that you do that. And what we're seeing is with entrainment, however you've entrained yourself, you know, when in the Catholic Church, they say that there's a saying from one of the popes, I think it says, give me a child till they're 7 and I'll give you a Catholic for life. That's because we're entrained by mom, dad, brothers, sisters, preachers, and teachers. We learn certain belief systems and they run our system, our nervous system, our neurological system. So what we need to do sometimes, not that we want to change their belief system, but we want to, if there are some limited beliefs in there, we want to get rid of them. My personal belief is that everyone has the infinite potential to heal themselves. Our body, just like you believe as a chiropractor, that we have a self-healing, self-regulating nervous system. We have to get rid of the interference and get the body to do what it does. So all of this fits right in with what your belief systems are, or hopefully into that area. So when we talk about chromoforms, when I was talking earlier, and I'm just going to slide these through so we can. When you think about chromoforms, every cell of your body has little batteries in the cell. Those are called chromoforms. They store energy. When you've absorbed enough energy, then your body starts reflecting what's left. That's why you can see me and I can see you, is because we've absorbed as much energy in the cells as we can from this source, and we're basically reflecting that light. So depending upon the type of light that we need, and I'm showing here red and blue being absorbed by the plant, and then we see the color green. We're seeing the colors that we're not absorbing. The colors that our body absorbs are the colors that our body needs. So what we're showing here is that with light therapy, whether it's a laser, low-level light pads, whatever you're using that's light therapy, the body only can take so much dose. And I'm going to get into that a little bit because Dr. Sadral, who's our science officer, he's one of the first people ever published with photobiomodulation in the brain. And so let's say you have a laser and you go, this laser works so well, I'm going to give you a 20-minute dose of it. Well, believe it or not, that might be too much. And we actually have evidence that shows when you give too much light therapy, it can actually have a negative effect. The cell receptors turn off and they stop absorbing light, so there's a certain amount of time in a certain period. And so like our light helmet, which I'm going to show you over here, we have that programmed so that the people with dementia can't do anything. They can't adjust the light frequencies, they can't adjust anything, they just press play and it does it, just like the BrainTap. We don't want people to have to mess with all that. We've already done all that for them so we know they're getting the right dose at the right time. Because now what we learned in what I talked about earlier about the Vedas and how they did the therapy in India was they did chromotherapy for all sorts of things. Not just in the morning. They had different times of the day where they figured out if people were to get out in those light rays, they would get different healing. As an example, at 2 o'clock every day, your temperature is going to drop 2 degrees. Happens every day at 2 o'clock, around there, depending upon where you're at. Wherever you're at in the world, at 2 o'clock it's going to drop because that tells our body it's time to recycle. We're in a cycle. It's not just women that have cycles. Every body has a cycle, and the body is resetting. Now, if we were still in the Serengeti, we'd take a nap, just like the gazelle and the zebras. But if you're in America, we do coffee, tea, chocolates, stay stimulated, stay alive, doing what we're doing. But really what we need is it's telling our bodies it's time to down-regulate. It's time to relax, reboot, have another day. And for most chiropractors, that's the time that you would want to do, or between 12 and 2 when you would do a session in your office, because you can roll a bowling ball through your practice usually at that time. I've been in practice, so I know that's when people are not there. So a lot of doctors will take 2 hours off during that time for their lunch. So it's really important you do that. So when we talk about, this is what I was talking about with the Human Genome Project. In 2003, when they measured the human genome, or they mapped it, right? We all heard this wonderful thing happen. They really only mapped 1%. Could you imagine passing your chiropractic boards by answering 1% of the questions? And they said, you passed, you leave. That's what they did with the Human Genome Project. The reality is that they did that because they said 99% of you, what you do in genetics doesn't matter. It's all just junk DNA. That's why they didn't get the genetic promise. They thought they could just change this little genetic thing here, genetic thing there, and we'd all have blonde-haired, blue-eyed super soldiers, or whatever, like Captain America or whatever. But the reality is that didn't happen because the 99% of junk DNA isn't really junk DNA. So what they really found out was the junk DNA changes every 40 seconds. So it's not like you change every 40 seconds. Maybe 10,000 gene expressions change this second, 10,000 more change, but you have trillions of gene expressions. So they're all changing all the time. And they do this by this biophotic exchange. Now, as we age, what happens is we don't have ATP. We don't have energy at the cellular level. So we don't have the energy to change our genes. So the only way is backwards. That's the telomeres and things like that. So the more energy we give our body, that's why a lot of people do the anti-aging thing, because light therapy is a really good way to keep the genes expressing, and basically has a stem cell reaction as well. Now also, mitochondria health is really important right now. Every cell of your body, when it's being assaulted by anything from EMF to toxic gases from paint cans stored in your home or something like that, your body can go into a cell danger response. This is, now, we know like when people have that, when they do this, when they hear a loud noise because they were in an accident, that's really bad. Well, that's happening at the cellular level. So the cells, each individual cell has its own life. And when Bruce Lipton, with his book Biology Belief, which I'll mention in a moment here, he talks about your cells are like a community, and that community has to work together. And if the community is working together, then we're healthy. If the community isn't working well together, then certain parts don't function as well. So what happens though, when we give light to that cell, they now know that it resets the Krebs cycle, resets the cell memory, and brings the cell back to life. In fact, Harvard actually kept a chicken heart alive for 35 years. And it could be a myth, but there's some research that backs it up. And they said the only reason that they stopped the experiment was a janitor forgot to turn on the lights and get rid of the excrement. Because as long as they could keep the cells clean, give it the nutrient it needs and the light that it needed, they said they could keep those cells alive indefinitely. So aging isn't exactly what we think it is. Right now, today, we're going to have more centenarians alive than ever before. People are moving toward, longer and longer age in living because of our life and what we're doing to basically feed our cells. And there are nutrients and supplements you can take as well, but I believe like William Cousins, who's like one of the founders and pioneers of light therapy, he said the most underprescribed nutrient in the world today is light. Light is, when somebody says they're low on vitamin D, that's a misnomer, which I'm sure you all know. Vitamin D is a hormone. It's not a vitamin. And it's triggered by light. And if we don't get enough light therapy, if you were to come to my clinic in New Bern, we have a big thing that has UV light. You step into it for 5 minutes. We've shown that we can increase people's vitamin D without taking vitamin D just by being in that light, because it's the light from the sun that triggers our body to produce vitamin D. Now, unfortunately, there's only one that I know of, and it's in our clinic because they're too expensive to make. But we actually have the evidence that it works. There's other light therapy that does that. Our blue light therapy has been shown to do that as well, but not in a study like the one we have at home. So the other thing is that 20 minutes after your adjustment, you have a magical moment there where you can do other therapies. So like this gentleman, Rob Powell, when we were featured in People magazine, he lost half his weight and kept it off for 5 years. If you connect with us at BrainTap, you'll see he's still a friend of mine. He's still thin 15 years later because he changed his thinking. My dad was 400 pounds, my mother was 350 pounds. So if anybody has a propensity to be overweight, I do. You know, and I probably would be, I mean, I could probably lose 20, 30 pounds, but they were massive, you know, and Michael's my brother, so you can see he takes better care of himself. You know, so different body types and things like that, but he changed his thinking, what was going on. So it's not always what you're eating that's the problem, it's what's eating you. And then if you give the body the energy it needs, it can return back to normal. Normal, the body can regulate itself, as we said before. So when we talk about what happens during dementia and Alzheimer's, so we're going to kind of switch gears from traumatic brain injuries, although this, what I'm going to share with you is the same, but I'm going to talk about dementia and also Alzheimer's and how we've been dealing with that in some of the studies. And then mostly is going to be the work of Dr. Kelly Miller because he's a chiropractor, and I think it'd be most relevant for this group to learn what he's doing. He'd be a good one to bring up to do his seminar too. Dementia is a rapid, basically rapid neurological death. We know that with light therapy and with the right conditioning, you can have neurogenesis, which means you used to think, even as early as 10 years ago, that we were born with only so many neurons, and when we burn them out, like people would say, you're killing your brain cells. No, you can create new brain cells anytime, but you need the right stimulus, the right terrain. Just like the gut terrain, you need the right brain terrain in order to regrow those neurons and get them to work. When we talk about this adipose tissue, the apoptosis, its generation, and then the amyloid plaque, you know, from 70 to 71 degrees, 90, when you think about how much amyloid plaque is building up, this is what happens also when our brain is not regulating at the gamma frequency. That 40 hertz frequency that is gamma is like the bass drum of a marching band. And even though, you know, you might not think that big bass drum's doing much, it's keeping the rhythm of the whole band together. And without that rhythm, as soon as that gamma brainwave goes off beat, it basically sends everything else into a cascade of issues and problems. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to bring MIT into it because our CEO, who actually is on the board at Duke, which I was telling one of you at the break, he also knows the guy that runs the brain lab at MIT. And when they put out this study with Lu Tai, she said that they used pulsating light and they were getting a 6% gamma improvement. Their machine cost $10 million. You go into a room and you sit there and you listen to a 10 hertz frequency. Now, they had never done it with a human. This was with mice. So when I went to visit her, I said, have you ever tried this with humans? No. I said, well, you got funding of $10 million and you didn't even try this with a human being yet? Oh, no, that's why we needed the $10 million to prove out. And so I pull out our little BrainTap and I said, you know what? Let's do an experiment with this because we've shown that we have a 23% improvement of gamma with this little headset. She said, no way. I said, well, you have all the technology here. Let's see what happens. She was blown away. We had 23% improvement in gamma activity to break down amyloid plaque and get the brain functioning better. So without her knowing it, one of our investors, who's part of our company, went to visit her because everybody wants to, in the investment field, there's a group that wants to help the brain, and he was one of them. And he went to visit her, and when he asked her, what's your competition? She said, this little headset that costs $600. And so we're in talks right now to get their technology into BrainTap. We don't need their technology, but we'd like to have their research because they've done a lot of research with blue light therapy and breaking down amyloid plaque in the brain. So I just put this up here because we're not the only ones using blue light therapy in the brain. This is a really important thing. So how big is this problem in the US? Currently, 16% of women and 10% of aging men 70 and older are getting it, right? So women more because they live longer. Now, the 5th leading cause of death in the US. So it's not just a problem you have, and it's also one of the biggest fears, right? Fastest growing cause of death, 123% increase just in those 15 years. It's probably getting worse right now. So when you think about it, this is a big problem, and if you're not dealing with it, most people don't even want to mess with it, right? But it's estimated 75 million in the US will be over 65 by 2030. This is why it's the age of the brain, and why if you start implementing brain fitness and you follow Dr. Miller's protocol, which I'm going to share with you. Yes?
So why some medical doctors call Alzheimer's a diabetic type 3 then? It's really due to what your definition of Alzheimer's?
Well, what happens is, most people don't know this, but your liver produces almost all the sugar your body needs. So when you have a stressful event, you produce as much sugar as a candy bar. You produce it in your liver. Now your circulating bloodstream can only have 1 tablespoon of sugar at a time. And guess who gets it first? The brain. So they're overproducing sugar, stimulant. Sugar is death to the brain. The brain does not want sugar for fuel. It will use it, but it wants fat. It wants really good fats for the brain. You know, like essential 3s and essential 6 fats and things like that. So, but what's happened is people have become sugar burners because another chiropractor that's a good friend of mine, Daryl Joffrey, wrote a book called Get Off Your Sugar, which I recommend because for brain health, that's one of the things we have to teach them is to get off sugar. Because the sugar in the body, when the sugar enters into the body, the brain gets first choice of all the sugar in the system. Because you need that. If that goes down, the rest of the system goes down. So it's going to get all the energy, all the resources it needs. So it's all the synthetic sugar and things. And what's happening is when you look at diabetes and what's happening, every cell, that cell danger response, sugar affects the brain in big ways. So what's happening is people are living long enough to see diabetes go from, now we're having children with, usually, type 1 diabetes would only happen when you were born. You're born with it. Now we're seeing at 13 and 14 years old, children are getting diabetes. And it's really, the main cause is sugar, the sugar consumption. We consume, we used to consume maybe 5 pounds of sugar a year 100 years ago. Now they say it's over 110 pounds a year the average person consumes. Per person. And the fat phobia that really killed the brain, and then what they're trying to do is give them statins, which is, our brain is made of cholesterol. So the moment they give them statins, they're signing them a death. That's a death penalty. Their brain is going to lose its plaquing, because that's protecting them. It would be like a fireman going in and putting down this retardant to stop the fire, and then somebody's going right behind and taking all that fire retardant off. They're getting it because of one thing, inflammation. So sugar causes inflammation. So you can say inflammation is the cause of it all, but the cause of the inflammation is the sugar and the diet and the lifestyle. It's a combination, but one of the main things you can do to help them, it's kind of like when we worked with weight loss for years. If we could get them off soda, like a lot of people, that's all they drank. We'd say, do you drink any water? Oh no, but I drink a 12-pack of Coke a day. Well, to drink a 12-pack of Coke, you got to drink 36 of equivalent water just to flush it from your system. Then you can start getting the positive bank account, to that. So so you just look at those little things you can do to change it. Now, when this increased to 5 million to 7.5 million currently in 2030. So this is a big group that we're going to have to work with. Somebody's going to have to work with them, or they're just going to sit in homes and nobody's going to care for them. But one thing I like about Dr. Miller is if we can get them soon enough, we haven't had a lot of great luck, like the results I'm going to share with you, with people that have full-blown Alzheimer's. Okay, so we need to get them when they still have dementia. One of the best ways you can tell, and this seems kind of crazy, but if they can't smell peanut butter, they're 10 years away from Alzheimer's. So a lot of doctors will keep a jar of peanut butter in their office just to see if they can smell it. And you'll be surprised how many people, especially over the age of 60,
Smell, I thought you said spell.
no, smell. No, I'm sorry, smell. Okay, so when we talk about saving your brain, that's the book that you can get. And Dr. Miller, I'm going to give you his number too at the end of this little part. So if you want more information from him, he can share with you. He's very open. He always speaks down at the Florida chiropractic events, and we usually sponsor him because our work kind of dovetails together, and he's one of our doctors. So he has a really good protocol that I'm going to share with you. And remember, we can give you these slides if you want, so you don't have to write everything down. So you can just take the slides and do what you need. So sleep is most important. So when we think about sleep, and I've already talked a little bit about it, but when we talk about sleep, why that's important is the ileoglymphomic system. That's the only time it opens up and cleanses the brain. So we can put all the great nutrition in, but if you want to clean your house, you got to get the garbage out first. You know, when the brain's full of all that junk and garbage, and some of that's just from natural metabolism, you know, just the brain doing its thing, and years of not sleeping. But if we can get that 1 hour to 2 hour deep sleep, that 3 to 4 hours of REM sleep, the brain's going to start to regulate, brain fog will go away, they'll start to focus again, their body will start to function. I always tell people sleep is your incubator for your superpowers. If you don't get sleep, you don't get those superpowers. It's like somebody stuck a kryptonite rock in your pocket all the next day because you just can't get it going. We talk about improving sleep, and this is the study that American Scientific came out in 2016, the March issue, page 45. That article, you can find it online if you want to get it and put it in your lobby, because sleep is so important. But they finally realized that at that moment of deep sleep, not being in bed for 10 hours, not being in bed for 8 hours, but getting that deep level sleep, because when you reach that, you go through sleep cycles, 5 to 6 sleep cycles. When you get into that deep delta state, your glial lymphomic system opens up for a microburst. Not for a total, it's not like a total dump, like a faucet opening up. The brain, we have to get them down there. Now, one thing we do know too is when you do a chiropractic adjustment, you're getting that same thing to happen. That's why the brain, why people start saying, wow, I've got more clarity after the adjustment. I can think better, I can sleep better. It's because you're setting up the nervous system for that better response. So when you think about these things, I already talked a little bit about EMF. That's probably the biggest deterrent now for people sleeping. They don't realize with the age of technology, people keep adding more and more technology to their bedroom. And some people can't handle that. 20% of your clientele are EMF sensitive, which means that they actually do feel it. For me, I think you could hook me up to electric charge, it wouldn't do anything, you know, but there are other people like my wife who's like the canary in the mine. If she's around electricity or anything that's too much field, it zaps her of her energy. And she's usually very vibrant and everything. So in your bedroom, I would definitely, if people aren't sleeping, have them create some kind of sleep hygiene. And we kind of talk about it here. But when we talk about, we do a lot with Dave Asprey, so he has the dark glasses people wear and things like that. I don't think that's as big a problem as just having them do a check at night, 2 hours before sleep, go around the house turning lights off. You know, so many times if they turn them off right before they go to sleep, they're getting all that light while they're walking around the house turning off those lights. But if you can do 2 hours before, it starts the brain thinking, hey, it's getting, because we used to be out there with the fire. You know, we didn't go out and get more wood when the fire burned, 200 years ago. We said, hey, it's time to go to sleep. That's where the old expression, burning a candle at both ends, came from. You know, we don't have to do candles, we just keep the lights on. So if we learn to turn those off, some people actually have red lights that they use to kind of dampen that. They actually sell those that actually help with sleep. But if somebody has, in his chapter in his book, he talks about a lot more issues. I always say 2 hours before sleep, only watch programs that are either fun, engaging, not too stressful, and not too much where you have to use your critical thinking. You know, we always watch a couple comedies, something, just to get in the mood for relaxing and sleeping. There's too much drama in the world to watch anything else, so those are really important. When we talk about atomic bands, stress causes a shift in that fight or flight. It causes cortisol. You know, when you think about what's happening to a salmon when they swim upstream, 2 hours after they fertilize those eggs or lay their eggs, they die. So unfortunately, this happens to a lot of people in their life. They retire and expire because they don't have any drive, they don't have any motivation. But it's really because of cortisol. There are people that actually, when they go on vacation, get chronic headaches during the whole vacation. Then they go back to work and they go away because they're so used to having that stress response that when it's gone, their body doesn't know what to do. So part of the key is to get their body to regulate differently and to respond differently, to unlock that. So if you have somebody, one of the questions, did they grind their teeth? It's not just a bite guard that they need stress reduction. They need to learn to create more capacity to handle stress. There's an old expression, I don't pray to God to get rid of my stresses, I pray to God to give me the capacity to handle them and manage them. Because we only grow in a stress environment. If we want everything to be, they actually had an experiment they did where they took away all the stressors in people's lives, and what they did is they found that they started arguing and fighting. So they said, well, this is people, we're going to do it with mice. The mice died within a year when they provided them everything they needed, when there was no challenges. So our nervous system needs to be challenged. It needs to do, and you can do it. It could be as simple as this. One of the exercises I teach people when they go to sleep, and it's free. They don't have to buy anything. They possess everything they need to do this. When they go to sleep, they close their eyes. When you roll your eyes up and look through your brow, you actually trigger alpha activity. We know that through science. So all you have to do is do that, and alpha starts triggering. Then while you're doing that, you breathe into the mental count of 4, and you breathe out to the mental count of 8. Now what's happening there is you're exercising the nervous system. When you breathe in, you get a sympathetic response. When you breathe out twice as long, you get a parasympathetic response. So you're teaching the body to regulate. And then you do what they call a body scan. You start at the bottom of your feet and you move up through your body. And if you make it all the way to the top of your head, that's when you do that success reel I talked about earlier. And then most people don't make it that far. They make it to their navel in their sleep, which is fine. The brain will continue to do the program. It will continue to unwind your nervous system, which is natural. You know, we used to all get together around the fire before bed, you know, out in the wilderness before we went into our caves, and we might chat about what was going on, and then we'd go to bed. Now somebody might watch, you know, whatever Bruce Willis movie is going to stress them out, and then at the end of the movie, after the good guys win, they go into bed and they're vibrating with all this energy. They go, why can't I sleep? You know, their body is just on fire because we take in energy that way. Now what happens, this is what it looks like. So this is one of the things that Michael can share with you on the HRV. If you haven't done it yet while we're here, he's in the back of the room when it's free. You can go back there and do it. But the total power, when we look at that, is 415. This is a normal brain that has dementia. Okay, so they're underperforming. They should be up to 2,385. Now you can exist like this for a long time. It's not like you're going to die tomorrow. This is one of the signs that you can show them. So the green represents parasympathetic, the yellow represents sympathetic, and the red represents a neurohormonal. This is the way most of them look because they're using their neurohormonal system to regulate their electrical system. It's very taxing. It would be the same thing if you lived there was a hurricane coming in and you put on your generator. That takes a lot more energy and effort for that generator. Your nervous system, the electrical system is free and easy, but your biological system is hard to shift those gears. So they're expending all their energy for their biological system. After they did the BrainTap, they had a little bit of a sympathetic response, but you can see that we downregulated the neurohormonal and brought the energy up to 3,138. This is the ATP I'm talking about. The body produces its own energy through the electrical system, through breathing, relaxation, and getting it to work efficiently. Now, when we talk about brain waves, in his book he goes into detail about all of these, but the beta brainwave creates dopamine. Dopamine is the reason we have all these addictions. Whether it's alcohol, drugs, pornography, whatever you think of, all those addictions are a dopamine addiction. In fact, you have an addiction if you send out a text and you wait for the response. Like the person on the other end has nothing better to do than answer your text. And then if you get it, you get that dopamine hit. If you don't get it, you might even text again. And if you don't get that one, you call, or maybe you text again, depending upon your personality. If you're a kid, you just keep texting like my kids do. I have more things to do than look at my phone to respond to your text, but everybody thinks that's instantaneous, right? I don't know what they would do. If you took away all the phones today, I think they actually have a diagnosis for us in psychology. It's called MoPhobia, mobile phone phobia. It's kind of like what used to happen with cigarettes. You know, people would cut across 3 lanes of traffic to get a pack of cigarettes if they ran out because they didn't know if they could do it, or they don't leave home without them. Do you ever wonder, to me, I always wonder these things, like somebody smokes a pack a day. And I go, how do you do that? 20 times a day, you stop everything you're doing and you go out and you smoke a cigarette. Oh, I don't even think about it. Yes, you do. You just don't know you think about it. Your brain set up that addiction. So every day you smoke exactly 20 cigarettes. And at the end of the day, you're crushing out that pack and you've done your pack. You've succeeded. Now you get that dopamine hit. You won. You got that. And even though they don't want to do it, an addiction is something that you don't want to do, but you do it anyway. So I always tell people, what if I could get you to do something you want to do but aren't willing to do, but will do it anyway? That's what brain training is. Because you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. Intention is good to galvanize your conscious mind, but you're not controlled by your conscious mind. Only 5% of your conscious mind is running the show. 95% of you is being ran by your subconscious. Bruce Lipton talks about it. A lot of different people talk about it because we're not controlling our heartbeat. Now we can make it increase by thinking negative thoughts or being fearful or doing fearful things, but eventually the heart's going to take over and do its thing. So think about that for a moment. Oh, let's go back. First I wasn't getting it to go now. So when we talk about vitamins and minerals, there are a lot of vitamins and minerals that work, and I try not to get into this because I know chiropractic is kind of like religion. We don't want to get into your nutrition. Whatever you feel is good for your patients is good, but just in general, just knowing what the brain needs. And most people out there are taking vitamins that aren't metabolized by the body. On YouTube, you can just write in the porta potties, just put porta potty dumping or whatever, you'll see piles of the Centrum 1 in all the vitamins because and there's also one on YouTube that's really cool. It shows a graphic of like 30 pills in the stomach. It's the 30-day supply. It's still in their body. It's just waiting to be eliminated. That's a slow motility, right? They need to eat more fiber to get that through the system. You should be delivering that earlier. But they showed all the pictures because the body doesn't know how to break it down. Anything that's pressed into a tablet with binders is probably not going to work. You want to find some kind of vitamin to give your patients that's loose leaf. We can't get it from the foods. You probably know that by now. There's no way we can get it from our food source. We have to supplement. So there's no choice now. If they want to be well, they've got to supplement in some way. And they're going to be looking at you, or they're going to go to their medical doctor, which unfortunately they just say, go get one off the shelf. I don't know. They've only had 4 hours of training. My brother-in-law, who's a medical doctor, I always run these things by him. He says, oh, we didn't learn anything about nutrition. And it's like, they don't think that even has any influence on it, but nutrition has a big thing to do about it. So we need to get them eating right, thinking right, breathing right, those kind of things. So the brain is 80% fat by weight, so that's what we were talking about, omega-3s, olive oil, coconut oil. What I tell my people that are coming in, I say, forget all your salad dressings, because those are all sugar, and don't eat the ones that don't have sugar because they have sugar, just a different kind of sugar that's even worse for your brain. Those are called excitotoxins, and they actually kill your brain. They shut your brain down. I always say just get out some really good olive oil, put it on your salads, and put salt and pepper and Italian seasoning. And that's a really good salad for the brain. Now if they do, a lot of people eat their salads and they're just dousing them with the cheap any kind of salad dressing is really bad. So they try to do the right thing, but I guess McDonald's doesn't sell salads anymore. I haven't been there in a long time, but somebody said that. I said, well, they should, because their salads were actually worse than their burgers. When you look at the nutritional values and what they did. So, I mean, everybody, when they turned fat, they made fat bad. And what they did, that was the sugar industry. They went out and they made fat the bad guy. So there's a lot of re-education with patients because they believe that they don't want any fat. Well, certainly they don't want potato chips and things like that, but they forget all the fats. We need to get them really including as much of they could eat, Daryl Joffrey, who's a fellow chiropractor, in his book, Get Off Your Acid, which is another book that he wrote, is really good. He recommends people eat 1 avocado a day. And they've had some magic stuff happen with the body by doing that. So, and a lot of people are worried, oh, there's a lot of fat in that avocado, but it's good fat. Your body will use it and metabolize it. So this is inflammation, as we talked about earlier, too. This is the autopsy of an 80 and 90-year-olds and who has amyloid plaque. So when you look at it, that's the brain, right? That's what a normal brain should look like. So when you're looking at it, this is done with a SPECT scan, which means they injected some dye into the body, and then they could take pictures of it in the brain. This technology is getting cheaper, but at the time, these were $5,000 to get a scan. So they didn't get a lot of scans unless you're working with Dr. Amen. The brain, like the gut, has its own microbiome. So we talked a little bit about that earlier, about the gut-brain axis. But if the gut is leaking, if you find out that that person has a leaky gut, I can guarantee you they have a leaky brain. It's always matched up. So they're coming up with more and more tests about this, but we have a brain biome, just like we have a gut biome. And so there's prebiotics for the brain and things like that we need. So the immune system's in the gut, as we talked a little bit about, and the entire nervous system is gut our feelings. Like when you have a gut instinct and things like that, they now know that we have gray matter in our gut. We have a thinking brain in our gut. It's a second brain. So we have to look at all those things. Healthy brain bacteria. And so it's all about living with all the bugs that are inside of us and not killing off the good ones and leaving the bad ones. The brain contains, what they found in the Alzheimer's brain is that it contains bacteria found like in dirt. So it's not the active kind of thing. So the brain, literally, they're dying from the inside. The brain is shutting down and doing those things. So I already talked about that, neurotransmitters in the gut. So when we think about this toxicity, this just puts something in perspective. 50 to 70% of MS patients test positive for infection. 80 to 100% of autistic children have abnormal yeast and bacterial loads. If you don't know yeast in the body, that's why people are craving sugar. The yeast loves the sugar, so that's why people have that adverse reaction. So sometimes they have to kill off that yeast before. So the infections need to be treated to stop persistent active microglia in the nervous system damage, because it'll start eating the cells. It'll start eating the nerve cells. It loves energy. So when we talk about neurohormonal response, we're talking about Alzheimer patients. They have a reduced number of neurohormonal levels. When we're doing a study right now, the Brazilian government is actually paying for this. They're paying $250,000 of their own money to prove that BrainTap is a digital drug. Not that we're doing a drug, but they're doing it with their top pharmacology school and the top pharmacologists, because we have a study that we put out for mood disorders, and they want to be able to give everybody in Brazil that has a mood disorder a BrainTap instead of giving them pharmaceuticals, because they're not working. And the study's going great. We'll have the study done by the end of next year, but they're doing full blood panels and that. We're already proving that we upregulate 54 different neurotransmitters and downregulate stress hormones. And that's what we need to prove they don't have FDA there, they have Invisa, they call it, but it's just like FDA. So they have to clear it to make sure that it's true, but it's all about the neurotransmitters. Right now, most people's neurotransmitters are off the chart. They're not regulating correctly, and that's because of sleep. That's when, during sleep, you build up this neurotransmitter bank account. If you don't, then it's not going to be there. So we talk about pregnenologen. You can get all these things. The acetylcholine stimulates, the thyroid doubles. If somebody's taking thyroid medicine, they really need to start working on their brain, because you can see 80% chance of getting Alzheimer's. Testosterone, estrogen levels, dopamine production in the frontal lobes, executive decision making is used. The optimum hormone levels equal better brain function. So if these signs are there, these are the signs when they show up at your clinics that you can say, hey, we really need to start working on this because you're heading down the wrong direction. And it's unfortunate that a lot of patients believe if they're taking medicine, they're actually fixing something. And so the easy explanation I say is, you have a car, right? Do you remember back when you used to have those lights that would come on and say, you need to check your brakes, you need to check your engine, you need to do these things? I said, all you're doing is you're putting a black piece of tape over it so you can't see the light. The warning's still there. So we need to fix the problem. And the problem's in the nervous system. It's not in the other. Now you can just work with them and do it, but if you have some real statistics to show them and real things to show them, they'll stay with care instead of just coming in till they get out of pain or till they think they need it. We all have genetic variances too. So when we think about less % of the load have severe genetic variances, therefore 80% of the load is due to lifestyle. That's the key part here. People go, oh, my family, it runs in my family. No, it doesn't. I mean, go back in time. When I was in school in the 70s, we had one overweight person. And believe it or not, he's the thin one today. When I met him at our reunion, our 25-year reunion, he was thin and healthy. He said, oh yeah, after high school I got fit and this is what he does now. And I'm going, and he was always the large one. It's like everybody else started expanding, so health kind of went down by the wayside. So it's about their lifestyle. We need lifestyle changes. What I used to tell people is that what we do and what you do is actually a gateway drug to the self-help industry. They're going to come to you because they're hurting. It's your job to inform them that they can take control of their health. They can become part of that chiropractic lifestyle and take care of themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then we have people that will be well. instead of just fixing them. You know, like the medical community just fixes people. Oh, you're patched up, you can go home now, we're done with you. Or what the medical community does with dementia and Alzheimer, right? Dementia, they say, start preparing yourself for somebody else to take care of you. With Alzheimer's, they start putting everything in your family's name because there's nothing else you can do. And they go, well, what am I going to do? We can give you these drugs to numb the pain, but there's really nothing we can do, which is a lie. They know that this will work. It's in when Harvard, MIT, and all these people are doing these research, they're just not looking at the research because there's no pharmaceutical pill that they can give them to program it. So that's the uphill battle we're going against, is who's educating your patients. So the more you educate them, the better. So when we talk about all these things, when we talk about maintaining insulin levels, one of the things you'll see, and I have a little bit of a slide of it, is that we got to get people exercising again and building muscle. When we talk about that second phase, before physical exercise became popular, they used to tell people, don't do that, don't lift weights, that stunts your growth. You don't want to do that. Now we know if we don't build muscle, it's going to affect our brain function. And when I say, we work with a company that does resistant bands, and that way the elderly, they don't have to do anything more than walk around the block and they can build muscle. You put these resistant bands on, walk around the block, and you can build muscle. It's just like lifting weights because you're tricking the system. It's part of a biohacking solution that we have because they can't lift weights. They could sit there and just do weights. They can act like they're lifting weights and build muscle. They don't have to lift any weights at all, so there's no harm in them getting hurt. But they're coming out with different ways to build muscle, especially in the elder population, so that they can do these things instead of sitting in rocking chairs and letting life pass them by. When you think about your beliefs and your thoughts, what you think about most factors is health, and happiness prevents Alzheimer's. When they talk about, there's something called blue zones. Anybody ever heard of that? Blue zones is a good book that you might want to look into. They figured out around the world why people in certain areas, they call them blue zones, why they live longer, why there's more centurions in there. And one of the criteria of living longer is having a community to communicate with. We are people want connection, right? We want to touch, move, and inspire people. Or people want to be touched, moved, and inspired. We don't want to be isolated in our homes, in little shells and not doing things. We are creatures of a community. So if you have that community, you're going to live longer, your brain's going to function better. That's why putting somebody in a facility that doesn't have the interactions is a problem. Do you have a question?
That also include sunlight.
Yes. Yeah, get outside. They were all in places, the reason they call them blue zone is they're near the ocean and they can get out and do water sports and they're active and things like that. So what do you think dictates your decision-making, belief system, and lifestyle? Be careful about what you believe, think, and say. Present time consciousness, which means there's people that wake up with catastrophe thinking. They wake up in the morning and think about all the ways life's going to go wrong. And I can say honestly, that was me before my dad helped me. I was held back in second grade. I just thought Sister Barbara loved me so much she wanted me in her class twice. But the problem was I was a very negative kid. I really believed that God's whole mission in life was to punish me every day. And then I'd prove him right. And then as soon as I changed my thinking, I realized nobody even cared about me really. I needed to take care of myself and start doing the things that I wanted to do. And I started reading a book actually called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, which I always recommend to parents that have kids that aren't functioning. I said, have them read that. That's their punishment. If they get in trouble, they have to go read that chapter and then tell you about it, because that's what my dad did for me. And eventually, after I read the book about 20 times, I got it. Sometimes the rocks are really hard. You got to hit them with a hammer many times. So that was me. But once it worked, I stick with it. I know when something works, then I'll start using it. So one of the main things too, when we did research in the brain sciences with, you look at Wisconsin University, or we've done some research with gratitude and forgiveness. Those are key components to your brain function. If your brain power is all tied up in all the things that people did wrong to you or issues that went on, so those are taking up all your brain capacity. You only have 100% energy. So what are you putting your 100% energy to? You want to put it to loving, forgiving. And when we say forgiveness, a lot of people don't understand that concept. It means to give before. It doesn't mean I'll forgive you if you do this or that or whatever. You just forgive them. Most people are carrying back, I call it in my first book, I've written 9 books, but the first book is called Awaken the Genius, and I talk about the dragons of the past. And I make it's kind of a joke, but people drag on and drag on and drag on their past, right? They want to tell you, oh, poor me, my dad was an alcoholic. You'll see in my book, I have a chapter that says I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic. Because if he didn't get help, I'd have to get help. I'd be the one sitting on the bar stool. At least he got help. The problem is if you see somebody doing something stupid and you do something stupid, who you got to blame? You can't blame the person doing the first stupid thing, the person following them. That's, you got to learn to think for yourself, like I said earlier. There's always hope for a better future. And one of the things they do know too is optimism. When people have optimism, they have much better functioning immune systems. So I tell people, because I've been accused at times from people saying I'm too damn positive. And I said, well, I'd rather be disappointed occasionally than disappointed every day. Because some people get up and they're disappointed every day. Like, this is a terrible world. This is a great world. There's never been a time in history that's as good as we have today, regardless of what's going on in the world. I mean, there's a few crazy people out there, but other than that, we have, if we could really see what was good in the world, we'd have a totally different news channel. I was being interviewed in Tucson, Arizona. This was years ago when I was going on a book tour, because the one book got Best How-To Book of the Year in '94. And I was on this tour, and this guy interviewing me, he goes, wow, he says, we tried to start a positive news network here in Tucson. And I said, what motivated you to do that? He said, well, we had a bus driver that saved the lives of 34 kids before the bus went over the cliff, got them all out of the bus, saved their lives. The bus went over the cliff, of course, destroyed the bus. Nobody ever heard about it. If that bus went over with a full load of kids, they'd have been saying, that bus driver was drunk, she had issues, whatever. That bus driver should have been in front of the city saying, congratulations, she took a lot of bravery to do that. She could have saved herself and just left the kids on there. There's so much good stuff going on in the world. It's up to us to focus on it. We would always have a client of the week at our center, whoever motivated the most clients, because we had a team environment. Actually, they had a saying, spend Patrick's money, because we had even had a fund for it, so they could do things together, because there wasn't enough positive things to do in our community. This was in Virginia Beach. We'd have sometimes 400 people show up to our, what we call client appreciation events, because we wanted to educate them and educate their community. If you came to my events, though, you'd have to bring a canned good, because we're going to give it to the needy, or you had to pay $35. So guess what? We got a lot of canned goods. So so you do something, and by the way, we weren't doing this like this, but we were getting a lot of press, because I had a radio show for 12 years though, and they'd hear that I was doing that, and they would give me media coverage. That's why we got 400 people there. And it was just about telling people, let's have more of a positive life. We would do those 4 times a year, by the way, and it brought in us a lot of new clients and patients. So negative emotions, anger, fear, anxiety. Does anybody know what all negative emotions have in common? Does anybody want to answer that? They all have one thing in common: lack of breath. If you've ever had a young kid come up, like my grandkids, I know better, but sometimes you just got to push the limit. Eli will be all mad and angry. I'll say, breathe. He just gets angrier. But as soon as they breathe, it's gone. Because you can't have negative emotions in a flow state. Breath is very important. So they have shallow breathing, high breathing. So if you teach them to breathe deep, think through it, and not get so triggered. So many people are so triggered by different things, and neurologically, they're up to here. They're, as some people say, they're on their last good nerve. And then that one thing happens, boom, that's the catapult. And they go, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that. I wish I'd have done something different. The reality is that we have to plan that. We have to prepare for that. So the perception of stress is less risk for Alzheimer's. So the less perception of stress. So we do know that stress, just like alcohol, you might not know this, but if you drink one alcoholic drink a day, just one at night, over the course of 5 years, your brain will shrink 1/4 of an inch. So, it's 1 year. In the course of 1 year, your brain will shrink 1/4 of an inch. They've had people that have died, they've done autopsies on them, and they had nothing more than a brain stem. They were still functioning. Nobody knew that was happening, because the potential of our brain is so enormous. So we need to get the perception of stress away. Also, when you have Alzheimer's or dementia, your regulation, which means as you get stressed, it stays longer, because you don't know how to reprogram or reset your nervous system. So 50 million Americans are diagnosed with anxiety disorders. Now we think, and we've kind of shown this in the lab, that all of these disorders happen with a dysregulated nervous system, meaning that the left and right hemisphere are not communicating at the executive function at the same speed. We can measure brain speed now with something called the WAVI, or a product called the New Mind. And they're both EEG machines. And if you measure across the frontal lobes, what you'll find in people that are with dementia, Alzheimer's, ADHD, ADD, is the left hemisphere is always moving slower than the right. So we actually, when I talk about the study we did, we actually created sessions that speed up one hemisphere over the other. Now, to use those, you need to have the device that can measure the brain. So most of our sessions just balance the brain. They don't do it that severely. Obesity and stress. The higher the body fat, the more inflammation. The higher the body fat, the more oxidative stress. And on and on. The higher the body fat, the smaller the brain. ADHD, autism spectrum, TBI, all of these things are oxidative stress. When you reduce this load on the body, we can reduce the internal stress that's happening on the body and the external stress, of course the body, again, we're going to get rid of that stress and get people working better. We want to build the capacity. It's all about capacity. How much capacity do you have? If you take, anybody here fly Black Hawk helicopter pilots? Any Black Hawk helicopter? I say that because I said this once in Norfolk, Virginia. We did have somebody in the audience, and I wasn't saying it correctly. But if I say it wrong, it's similar to this. Let's say you're learning to fly a Black Hawk helicopter. They don't just put you in the cockpit and say, fly the Black Hawk helicopter pilot, because each foot is controlling how the bird flies. So each foot is navigating how the bird moves, so they have to do their feet. Their hands are not only handling the weaponry, but also handling comms and communication, and each one handles different guns on each side. So they're having to do those. That's 4 things now with many things in between there. Then you've got in your one eye, you've got a heads-up display where you have to read that heads-up display and keep doing it. You've got in one ear your crew that's in the helicopter telling you what's happening. In the other ear, you got the tower, whoever your CO is. And you're flying this helicopter all at the same time. And then somebody has the audacity to start firing at you. So imagine, and I got curious, I go, why are all these, because when we're in Virginia Beach, these helicopters fall out of the sky all the time. Well, that guy is stressed out to the max. Why are they making that one man or woman do that? But they love it. The problem is when I met some of these Black Hawk helicopter pilots, they had PTSD just from their training. And the reason they have that is when you have a high level of chronic stress, not low level, high level chronic stress, like in battlefield conditions and military conditions or abusive relationships where it's prolonged, your body starts to think that's normal. And then when you don't have it anymore, so let's imagine little Jimmy comes back from Vietnam, I'll use that as an example since it's further away, and they're having a party, they're celebrating, hey, you're back, great. And so it's still chaotic, hectic, they're trying to get their bearings. 2 weeks after that, nobody remembers he was in Vietnam because they have their own stresses, their own life, and Jimmy's sitting there by himself, and now he's got to create an environment that mimics Vietnam. He's got to create havoc. He's got to create the stress. He's got to create the battlefield conditions so he feels normal. So when we're working with these people with PTSD, it's not about changing the environment. It's about changing their internal representation of that environment. They've so conditioned their nervous system to believe that's normal. It might have been normal during battlefield conditions, but they're not able to do it when they're off. And now what's happening in Vietnam time, if you were in Vietnam, you cycled out after one tour. I've worked with people that have had 4 tours in battlefield conditions. 4 tours in one lifetime. Their brain doesn't even know what to do.
Can you change it?
Oh yeah, we can help them. But I mean, when they come in, some of them never sleep. So the first thing we do is we put them on the grieving program, and then we put them on the sleep program. The grieving program, because nobody ever learned how to forgive, forget, and move on. In every one of those negative conditions, they said, I got to figure that out. I can't figure this out. I just don't understand it. If you're saying that to yourself all the time, you're engaging your brain in a process of discovery that you might not ever solve. That's why the old saying, I accept the things I cannot change. I change the things I can, and give me the wisdom to know the difference. But what happens is when we try to control things that are outside of our control, that's when stress really gets bad. Because even with third generation welfare families, they found out the biggest stress is the fact that the children are being programmed by the grandparents that why should they succeed when they weren't able to do it, their parents weren't able to do it, they're surely going to be a loser. You know, they're just going to live on the system. And they're not being trained how to think, they're being trained what to think. So it's all about stress and how the brain's reacting to it. Metal toxicity, these are things that affect the brain in big time. And there's a gentleman up in Michigan that we work with, his name is Terry Wright. It's Right Way, and he has a home kit that you send into the home, and nobody has to do anything. They just set it up in the home, run it for whatever, 3 to 5 minutes, pack it all back up, send it back, and they'll tell you if there's mold in the house and that. Because we've had people that we've found mold in their brain, and that's what's really the problem that's happening with their brain function. So that's the external environment. I'm not going to go into massive detail about this, but if you get his book, he'll go into more detail about this. So some of these things just cross over the blood-brain barrier, go right into the brain, and start affecting brain function. When we talk about cleaning up the environment, there's a lot of different devices to dampen EMF fields. Biggest thing is if you live near one of the new towers they happen to put up, because those were necessary during COVID, to put up over 40,000 towers in America. Well, nobody could work. Nobody could deny it without any oversight. And they're sitting there. They know that people live around those towers are probably subject to more cancer, brain cancer than anyone else, but they still put them up anyway because they don't even know what those frequencies are going to do. But you can stop them. The biggest thing you can do is get outside barefoot, get grounded, because we're designed to move energy through our body into the earth, what we don't need. What's that?
You're still taking it in.
You're taking it in, but it's not staying in. Like I said earlier, if you have a voltometer at home, just take that voltometer, measure yourself wearing your shoes inside your house or your office. Then take your shoes off, go outside in the dirt and do the same thing. You'll see it's 0. You don't have to worry about that. If you came to my office, you'll see it underneath every keyboard. We have a grounding mat. So our staff doesn't have to be, they can just every once in a while just put their hands on it and ground out all that energy. Because it's just it's not going away. Nobody's going to give up their cell phones, or 500 television stations or whatever. They have to get their 40 hours of television in this week, so they're going to keep doing that. So now we can watch it on our phones. We can do all sorts of things. So when we're eating organic, the one thing too is that the GMO foods, people don't understand. We don't know what that's going to do to our bodies, and now that they don't really even have to label it like they should in most places, they find ways around this. We need to eat as close to nature as possible or know where your sources are. When my daughter was born, she was born with a chronic problem with her digestion. She had to have 2 pieces of her intestine removed. She has to eat 80% vegetables or she'll have problems. But I think everybody needs to eat 80% vegetables. The problem is, where do we get the good vegetables? So you got to spend a little bit more money doing organic or figure out how to do it yourself. Avoid the trans fats, the aspartame, the MSG, avoid the flu shots, and if possible, all vaccines, because they have things in them that are going to, if you go to VARs, you're going to find out there's a lot of bad stuff going on out there. I mean, some you can't avoid, you've got to do, but if you can avoid it, you avoid it. So reading, when we talk about becoming a lifelong learner, one of the things with the Blue Zones too, they were always researching and learning. If you keep an open mind, a learning kind of awareness, you're also going to find out. So what Dr. Miller does, if you follow him on social media now, you'll see young kids and the seniors he's working with have the BrainTap on, and they're using SMR training while they're reading, because it keeps their focus and their concentration. It makes it so what they're reading they can stay present to and understand it. But we need to exercise our brain and get it to do the faster processing that needs to be done. Blood flow. The brain uses 50% of the cardiac output. 20% oxygen in the body, 25% of the glucose. And then when you think about cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, reduced blood flow to the brain. That's why it's the problem that we talked about earlier. When you think about the PTSD, TBIs, Alzheimer's, all reduce blood flow to the brain via the SPECT scan, which you can see here. The areas that aren't showing up, that's where there's no blood flow. So it's only taking pictures. When you look at a SPECT scan, you're seeing blood flow in that area. So you can see the traumatic brain injury, it almost looks like Swiss cheese there. That's what happens when things like that happen. So the top ways to improve blood flow to the brain, first of all, exercise. getting people moving and breathing again. That's number one. You can have nitric oxide enhancers. There are supplementation you can take to stimulate nitric oxide, and different foods do that. The different supplements you can take. You can do PMF. We have a PMF mat that goes on our chairs even, that doctors use at the same time. If you came to my house, I have a PMF mat with a sound chamber where I do my brain taps every morning when I'm home. So I get PMF and sound therapy through my whole body while I'm doing my brain taps. So there's all sorts of different ways you can do that. Infrared therapy is one way. Of course, BrainTap neurofeedback's another way. So all of these are ways to get, if you challenge the brain too, if you're always used to driving home a certain way, you should start changing that up. Anything you can do to challenge it, even crossword puzzles, things like that, are going to help to stimulate blood flow in the brain. When you have repetitive head trauma, you can see 2 strokes. Look what the brain looks like there. Now there's matter there. In this picture, it looks like there's not. That's because there's no blood flow there. So it's basically just matter in there that's not doing anything. So you can see that it's really heavy. So a single concussion can double the risk of developing Alzheimer's. When people ask me, why do I do everything I do? Because I've been on a lot of biohacking podcasts, and they say, what do you do every day? Because I'm 60 years old and this is what I do. And I had a lot of traumatic brain injuries. I played sports. But 7 years ago, I was in a biking accident, and I didn't remember my name for 3 days. But when I went back to the doctor 30 days later, he said, you don't look like you've had a head trauma. I said, no, because I used all my therapies. You know, you don't have to be suffering from all those things. You can have a good memory, good focus. The only thing that never came back, I used to do a lot of parallel processing, and now we know that's not good anyway, so I can't do that anymore. I used to be able to, my wife used to say, you're not listening to me, and I used to be able to repeat back everything she said. Now I really ain't, I'm not listening to her, so I've got to turn my attention and actually look at her. And by the way, that's how our brain, when I talked earlier about your hearing 25,000 pieces of information at one time, your vision is actually 30% of your hearing. So when we work with NORA, which is the Neuro Ophthalmology Research Association, we found out that that's why when you're in a seminar and you can't hear the lecturer, but as soon as you move your attention so you can see the lecturer, now you can hear them, that's because it's tuned into our primitive brain. We don't hear everything, we hear what we're looking at. Now some people are better at the other than most, but the reality is that when we engage it, so while we're using that photic light stimulation in the eyes, we're engaging more of the brain during the session. So recall, retention, comprehension of the information increases because more of the brain is engaged. When you close your eyes, you actually shut down over 30% of the brain because the brain is preparing you for sleep. So we want to keep executive functioning going. That's one of the reasons we use the stimulation. So loss of consciousness with this gene variant increases the risk tenfold. When you think about protecting the neuroceuticals before and after, high risk is bicyclists, which I believe in, football, rugby. The only thing I hadn't played there is rugby. But Dr. Miller, when you meet him, he went to Life, and he was a rugby player. So, yes, yeah. So he'll tell you he's been in the bottom of too many rugby kickoffs or something, you know. But he's a funny guy. But he's doing really well. I mean, he's not a young guy either, but he's doing all the things that you want to do, and he's a very gifted doctor. So when you think about this chronic traumatic encephalography, similar to what happens with PTSD. So what happens is throughout their life, they're this steady combat. I'm actually part of we're producing a documentary called Assault on the Brain. It's being put out by Red Pill Productions, so you know what we're going to be talking about a little bit. But we're putting it out because our brain is under attack right now. Almost everything they're doing is to shut down our nervous system. And so, and not make us healthy. It's crazy. I mean, why most of the medicines we have do what they do. They should be used in a cycle to get people to a certain level, then turn it over to a natural medicine practitioner who can make them well, instead of keep them toxically sick for longer periods of time. They found out how to keep us alive long enough to take all our money. You know, they say that most money is lost the last 5 years of your life for medical care. So, you know, unfortunately that happens. So when we talk about the next one, there's another product too that I mentioned here. It's Canary Speech. If you want to look that up, it's an app on your phone, and what they now know is your speech. You can talk it into the phone, and they can pick out a concussion in 2 sentences. 97% accuracy. So if you do a baseline, you can use it. Now they have one now that they're doing, they're just now getting all the voices because they can, this is done through the National Institute of Health and a few other organizations, but they're going to be using it for when they have people calling in for problems with suicidal issues. So they can pick that out if somebody, they claim right now it's about 95%. If somebody's calling in and they're actually going to commit suicide or not, they can tell in their voice. Your voice has parameters. There's therapies that we learned about. They're here in America too, but in India is where I saw it. They have technologies where they have you speak into this device and it figures out all the chords, the musical chords that you're not using in your voice. They play those back to you and you get healthy. So sound therapy is also accelerating in everything it's doing there. So there's more to our voice than just the way we sound. There's something's going on there that they know about. So activity, so what he does, believe it or not, these are people that couldn't even hold themselves up. He gets them doing planks in his office. And these are people that were used to just sitting around thinking all I'm going to do is waste away till I die. He's got them physically exercising. He does a lot more than this, but I just have this one representation. So regular exercise increases blood flow to the brain, reduces Alzheimer's risk, improves lean mass to fat ratio, high intensity exercise for short duration. So we're not doing distance running. You know, our bodies are not designed for distance running. I don't know about you, but when I watch the Olympics and I see those guys coming in from the marathon, not one of them looks healthy. I ran track in college and I was a sprinter, and I always dreaded when they had us run the 8 miles, you know, because they told us we had to have that to get in shape. And it was like we had us run actually 4 miles out to a bar that we'd all go to and 4 miles back. So they were saying, so on the weekend you'd remember what you had to do on Monday morning. But I didn't feel that we're meant for short bursts of energy in building muscle. You know, we just like that zebra, we only have to elude our prey. Nobody's coming after us anymore. But if we were on the food chain, we wouldn't have to move that fast or that far. Plus, we're not going to outrun a cheetah at 7 miles an hour running a 25-mile marathon. Exercise increases serotonin, increases endorphins. So the other thing is insulin sensitivity is one of them. Now, this also is the reason why we have so many overweight people in the world. Insulin sensitivity and what's going on. But as people age, if they have age spots like this, that's a sign that they need brain help. You know, so it's natural, of course, as we age, but it's not natural to take over our life and our style. So we can do that. So insulin resistance is type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity, all have risk for Alzheimer's. Insulin resistance creates or increases the A-beta formation. That's that beta amyloid plaque we talked about. So if you have insulin resistance, it also it increases blood sugars. So when he thinks about this, that's like burning sugar in a pan. That's what's happening, but it's happening at the surface. Your biggest elimination organ is not your digestive tract, it's your skin. So that's where it's coming out, and it's burning at that point. So insulin sensitivity encourages the non-amyloid pathways and reduces Alzheimer's risk. So when we restore it, how do you restore this? Because I want to try to give you some solutions as well as tell you all the problems. So first thing is exercise, especially weightlifting. Now if they can't lift weights like this, that's when we get the exercise bands. And we have them at our office for people so they don't have to buy them if they want to come in and use them. They're only like $400, so they're not that much money. Unless you get Katsu is the company that actually came out with it. And there's a lot of evidence out there. If you look at resistance bands and muscle growth, you'll see it accelerates muscle growth, especially in the aging population. But you can lift weights like this, that's one good way. Remove refined sugars, as I talked about. Supplementing with cinnamon, chromium, folic acid, L-carnitine, all of these different supplements. Those are things that we find that the brain responds well to. Now, sometimes it's hard to get people to take all the supplements, so we try to get it all in one place instead of doing it all at one time. So you can talk to Dr. Miller about how he does it if you need help, but if you know about your own nutrition and your own protocols, these are the protocols that he uses. Neurotransmitters. When we think about dopamine, this is the frontal lobe, this part of the brain. And this part of the brain is the part that does beta waves. And think of it as the battery of the brain. So if we don't have frontal lobe energy, like if we don't have high energy in our frontal lobe, we can't function. It's key to brain function. And it's also a deficiency in that we know is either Alzheimer's or is going to lead to that very quickly. So one of the tests we do with the WAVI is we're going to check frontal lobe voltage. And that's also one of the ways in our research we show if the therapy's working, we should increase that energy in the brain. Acetylcholine is the temporal lobes. So if somebody's low in alpha activity, we know this is the part of the brain that's been damaged. Somebody was asking me that earlier. If this is happening, we could do a brain scan, we could do that all. It always proves out the same. If somebody has an injury to this area of the brain, they're not going to produce those brain waves. We're going to have to create that. Now you can supplement, of course, but the supplementing is only a temporary thing until you get the brain making its own neurochemistry. To give you an example, one romantic event with your significant other will dump about $30,000 worth of acetylcholine into the system. You could not supplement enough for your brain to function correctly. You can do it temporarily just to give you a boost, but you need to get the brain regulating itself because we just can't take that much supplement. You just can't do that. Glutamate increases trauma, aspartame, and MSG. So all these things are working counter to what we're doing with neurotransmitters. That's why I'd rather have somebody doing cane sugar, let's say, if they're going to do anything, than any other kind of sugar. Now, no sugar is best, but if they're going to do something, or they could do something like stevia, something like that. What's that? Michael. Oh yeah. Those are okay too. Yeah, they don't have a spike in insulin and things like that. Yeah. Michael's our educational director. He knows more about nutrition than I do, so you could ask him all those questions. But GABA is the proprietary loads. It inhibits and produces theta brainwaves. So what we find with people that aren't sleeping is they have a problem with this area of the brain, and they have a problem producing theta. Most of our sessions, 90% of all sessions we have in BrainTap are to produce theta brainwaves. Without theta, you can't sleep because you need GABA, which is the precursor to DMT, which is the precursor to dream cycles. So that's why we have the dreaming. When people say, I don't dream, what they're really saying is, I don't produce enough DMT. Because our brain produces it. So if we get the right, this is a precursor. So GABA also is produced in high levels of gammas too. So we have those two different areas. It's a very important neurotransmitter. Serotonin, which is the occipital lobe, inhibits and produces delta waves. This is the one that, for some reason, they decided to jump on with all the drug and medications, because serotonin also makes you feel good and have energy, but it really dulls you. I don't ever tell somebody to get off their medicine, but I say, will you be willing to go to your medical doctor and work with us to either get you on less or take you off completely? And if they are, we work with their medical doctor to do that, because unfortunately, almost all pharmaceuticals are 97% aluminum. They're not even the drug that they say on the bottle. They're fillers. Just like supplements at Walmart. So you got these fillers, and why are they giving them aluminum, you might ask? Because it dumbs them down. It makes you docile. You don't have mood disorders, you don't have a mood. You don't have any mood, you just become almost droid-like. And then when you take them off it, they get angry because the nervous system has to work again. So that's why it takes so long. You got to do it over time. I never recommend somebody get off at SSRI without having a medical doctor involved, just because they might have an adverse effect. So this is neurotransmitters in the brain. Oh shoot, I didn't realize this covered it up. But when you see 73% delta, that's probably our normal brain. I don't know, we'd have to check with Michael what it is here today. But I would say the average is between 73 and 40 is the delta brainwave activity of normal people that come into our clinic, which is very high. That delta should only be about 7% while you're awake. All brainwaves happen. We call this a full spectrum brainwave. Theta should have about 10%. Alpha should be about between 25 and 30%, and beta should be 45%, and then the balance being in gamma. This person has a high degree of gamma, over here 13% on the after one. So we're trying to move it so that we have that nice mountain peak over beta and alpha, because then you have critical thinking and you have intuition. You need both of those things to operate in a day-to-day experience. So the other thing we do, this is, somebody's talking about with me at the break about their whole body vibration. This is a sonic plate. We use those. We also have the mechanical ones, but the sonic plate is easier for people that have brain trauma because it uses sound vibration to move the lymphatic system. And you can put different frequencies in it. So you stand on this sonic wave and it vibrates. And then this is this is a prototype of a head harness we're creating so you can use it at the same time as a BrainTap, but they're up there. It's a light therapy. It comes around here and goes down and hits. For lasers, if you have a laser at your office, one of the best places to activate the brain is back here, the basal ganglia. You just put as much light as you want there, 3 to 5 minutes, and you're going to get similar effect as the head harness. It's going to modulate out into the brain. It's a really good. And then also, if somebody has dementia with your laser, you're going to put the laser on the left side. So it'll stimulate that. With Dr. Brandon Crawford's lasers, if you go to him, they actually have frequencies. We work a lot with them. They'll tell you what brain frequency you want to do, and you can set the laser to that frequency. And it actually stimulates, because the brain will match that frequency. And you're giving it light energy at the same time. So they've done a lot with lasers over the years now. So the double therapy is he's actually using a PMF belt at the same time. And somebody was asking about using BrainTap while they're moving. We can't use BrainTap while they're moving, but this is a way you can use light, sound, and vibration while they're moving. It's not our device, but there's other ways you can do that. You can use the head harness. This is a PMF belt. And one thing about the body, it doesn't matter where you put the stimulus, it's going to go all over the whole body. Like there's a cool video online from a Harvard doctor who has somebody in a photic chamber, and they put a laser on their finger, and they get to, in slow motion, they show you how that light actually activates the whole body. They just put it in the finger, and it traces through the whole body. So that through photobiomodulation. So the body will absorb the light. As long as you're giving it stimulant, it'll continue. Once this cell, this chromoform is full, it'll move to this one and this one, this one. It'll just keep filling up the body until the body's totally full of energy. And then it won't accept it anymore. That's why most therapies that use low-level light therapy are no more than 20 minutes. A laser, you can do the same thing with a laser in about 3 minutes. So lasers are faster because you can produce more energy at that point. The only problem with a laser is somebody has to do it. Unless you do like Brandon, I have his laser at home, and it has little settings so I can set it on. It almost looks like a mic holder, but it's holding the laser. So you don't have to hold it, over the body. These are low-level light lasers as well. They're not the heat generating ones. So here's a spec scan as well of before and after. So the top part is the before, the bottom is below. So you can see when you see the gray matter is what you want to see. The left side is the before, the right side's after. So blood flow is gray. So this is just another way that spec scan produces an image. And what happens pre and post, this was pre and post his therapy, 6-week protocol on the Saving Your Brain protocol. And what we did in the study, and I think I have the results, so I'm not going to tell you right now. I think I have them here. So when we're using BrainTap, this is one of the ways you can use it with just the app. So when you're working with your clients, if you're with BrainTap, we give you the ability to gift the app to your clients for free for the first 15 days. And then if they want to pay 99 cents, they can increase it to 45 days. And then they're doing that at home, not the light therapy, but they're doing the sound therapy in between your therapy. And then if they want to buy it, then obviously we would sell it and you would get a commission. But the reality is that we just want them to start down-regulating their stress. So in between what you're doing, they can use sound therapy to do that. Now, this is a therapeutic change. This was basically what happens within a 90-day change, a 39% neuroplasticity in this individual. Hopefully I have enough. And then after 90 days, they had a 58% normalization score. So we did this is part of a study we did with women 55, 65 years old. We didn't do anything but BrainTap, but we got better results when we did chiropractic care beforehand. So just as I was saying before, and nutrition. That makes a difference, and physical exercise. But when you do a research process, you either do it on the whole process or you do it on one thing. This was done just with BrainTap because we wanted to isolate it. Because when we did the other study, which showed even better results, people said, well, it's probably because of the adjustment. It was probably because of the nutrition. It's probably because. So we said, okay, we're going to isolate them all. And they all work. We know they all work. So what we did is we showed a 49% neuroplastic change in our pilot study. and we showed a 58% reorganization score. But the biggest thing was the doctors said if they would have came in like they were after the 6 weeks, they would have never diagnosed them with dementia. But the problem we have in today's society is, in our medical community, is now that they're diagnosed with dementia, they're diagnosed forever. Because there's no cure, right? There's no cure for dementia. But all the symptoms go away, but they've still been diagnosed before. So now that study, that's the study that perked up the ears of Duke University when we presented that to the neuroscience at Duke. And we can't get into their studies because mostly studies are done by the pharmaceutical community, and we can't compete with their money. But they look over all of our numbers, and we have a Unisol in Brazil, which is one of the largest universities in Brazil, and the one that our science officer put together, the neuro center there. They're doing the full-blown study on 100 people that are doing this, and they're following that protocol, and they're getting the same results. Seminole College, which is a college, not a university, but they have an IRB, and they have an elderly community that they're working with. They're mirroring that study down in Florida right now, and they're getting phenomenal results. So we're going to publish that study very soon here, and that you could use too, because we're showing that and we did a study, that's where we did the study with people over 100 years old, just to show that the brain can change at any age. Because people think, oh, I'm too old for that, I can't do it, but you can change at any age. Now, the green is good, so the 4 locations with the highest change to normalization, you can see the left hemisphere. That's the one we want to have change, and it's changing. And then the others have to do with other regions, but the main thing you want to see is that if you've seen EEG scans, this will make a little bit more sense to you. This is also 60 days. This was with EC is the name of the person. He's 80 years old. He has minor cognitive decline. He got a 47% neuroplastic change in 60 days, 38% normalization skills. And you can see his changes were more in the mid-range of the brain instead of the frontal lobe to get those kind of changes. So it's not always the same thing that changes to get the result that we need. This is another 82-year-old, 60 years old, 36% neuroplastic change, 47% normalization after 60 days. So this shows top and bottom what's happening. The top is before, green is good, red is bad. So you can see how things have changed in the areas of the brain and what's going on. Of course, what we do with our HRV when we're monitoring is when we get somebody up to 80% efficiency, which we can score on our neuro link, then we put them on home care. Until then, they have to come into the office 3 times a week. Now, home care means they come into the clinic at least once a month for reevaluation and what's going on with them. So before and after, this is another 80-year-old. So you can see the under-arousal, which means when somebody's under-aroused, that means that they have a non-performing nervous system. You could try to adjust them all you want, but it's not going to bounce back, so we need to do something to get that going. You can see this was again after 60 days, so you can see it's now lower. You want to have a reactionary system. You don't want to be full-blown at the onset. If somebody comes in and they're all excited and nervous and you try to adjust them, it's probably going to exacerbate the problem, or it could be exactly what they need, depending upon your guess as a doctor. Before and after, again, you can see how it's normalizing memory processing, how we improve memory processing to the good score. I don't know why they did it that way. It looks kind of backwards, but you can see the memory is one of the things that we wanted to process. This is verbal processing. Remember, alpha controls memory, and what we find is the Alzheimer's brain and the autistic brain, if you took 2 brains side by side, you didn't tell them this is a 4-year-old that has autism and this is a 90-year-old that has dementia, you wouldn't know the difference. Their brain scans are pretty much the same. They're just, one's got more gray matter than the other, but they're still all there. By the way, you might not know this, but when we're born, we're fully connected. Our brain is fully wired. As we age, it unwires. It's not the other way around. People think they're learning and reconnecting. We're disconnecting our brain through our whole life. That's why we need to exercise our brain to keep those neurons firing and wiring, because it's designed to keep what they call neural pairing. It keeps taking away things it doesn't think we need. So it can keep the energy stores up. But if we keep our energy stores up, it can keep the whole brain active because we have the energy to do that. That's the key to the process working. Now this is an 80-year-old M with cognitive decline. So what we're looking at here is this is a scoring test. So this was back on August 4th, 2018. They got 5 correct, incorrect 19. The response time was 1,945. This was a little bit of testing that we were doing. And after, when he did the test on October 3rd, 2018, which is a couple of months, now he got 9 correct instead of 5, 15 incorrect, but his response time went up to 3,134.15. So this is a really impressive score for most people that do cognitive decline, because usually you don't see them getting better. Usually you see them getting worse. 60 days it'd be even worse than it was before. Again, this is a baseline study with an 80-year-old paying attention, not paying attention 5, impulses 5, response time 489. When they went to, that's out of the range. Now they're paying attention is in the range, 98. They didn't pay attention only twice. They had 10 impulses in the response time. This is something where we have flashes on the screen. It's one of the tests we do for cognitive decline. And this is a short-term memory one where they went for longest sequences. And you can see again the improvement that happened. It wasn't quite as severe here or as dramatic, but it's still good improvement in what's happening with them from August 4th to October 3rd. And then when we look here, this is another 80-year-old. They had 20 incorrect, or 20 correct. They jumped it up to 34 correct, which is a massive improvement. Their processing time didn't improve as much, but their ability to process information really improved.
Why is the increased response time considered improvement?
Because you can, like if I ask you a question, they go, how fast do they respond? That's what we want to know. How fast, when I ask you a question, are they there? Are they present? Are they going off somewhere and doing their thing? What typically happens is they have to, like somebody goes, just a moment, I know that answer, I know what to do, and they're thinking about it. The more they think about it, what the brain does, if the brain's out of sync, the hemispheres, let's say you think about something for a moment, your brain gives you a millisecond to get that information. If not, it starts neural pairing. Those neurons that fire together, wire together, the neurons that fire apart tend to wire apart, they're wiring apart now. That memory is getting further and farther away. Right, they can't find it. It's like I put it on the hard drive, there's a picture of you and mom, I know it's there on the hard drive, I can't find it. But imagine you could just, boom, you have a system that searches through that. Just like whether you like Google or not, that's why Google became popular. It was able to have more response time, faster with the relevant information. That's what we're measuring. Yes, Michael?
I was going to tell one other example of the test is you go 1, 2, 3, 4, but they have a test where you go 1, then you go to find A, then you go to 2, then you find B, then you go C, then you find 3. So when they're looking at that, it's how fast they can connect all those. So the next time they take the test, they're making that connection fast.
And it changes every time, so they can't learn the pattern. They can't trick the system, so they know, the system knows, hey, you took this test before, now you're going to take it this time. And you'd be surprised, it's easy for a young mind, like a sharp mind, to do it, but when you get somebody in there that's got a little bit of decline, it takes them a while. So that response time is really important. We call that also recovery time. So how quick do you recover from one event to the next? So this is a brain of an Alzheimer's person. 11%, when I talk about the corpus callosum and what's happening there in the hippocampus, they have no energy. They can't do anything. They can't process any data. They have no energy to do it. We need ATP at the cellular level to process information. Without it, or mitochondria health, however you want to think about it, you need that energy. So the energy it needs, you could eat a meal and 4 hours later you get the energy. What always blows me away is people, I'm so tired, I need food. And then they eat a candy bar. They get a little bit of fuel, but the reality is they didn't get fuel even from the candy bar yet. Just a short-term little buzz. It takes about 4 hours to really claim the energy from the meal. You got the psychological benefit of knowing that you're no longer at fear of not eating. That you triggered the response of starving to death, which is still in our genetic code. We have all the memories of our mom and dad when we were conceived, and their mom and dad when they were conceived, and their mom and dad when they were conceived. All that genetic code gets passed along 7 generations. After that, it pairs off. And so 7 generations back, that's who you are. Only up to the moment you were conceived, but it's still there. So how old were mom and dad at that point? I know my dad when I was born, was like 20 years old. So I didn't get his best stuff. I got whatever he was doing at 20 years old, which I hear wasn't too good. So that's the whole thing. So So here's Dr. Miller's information, if you want to write it down, if you want to contact him, or we'll get you the slide deck if you want it. But I believe we recommend this book to anybody we're working with. It's a book written for your patient, but you could get a lot out of it. He also has some training that he's helping us put online to help doctors to learn how to implement this in their practice. He's a very good guy, very generous with his time, so be mindful of that, just like you have a practice. But he will answer your calls and he will talk to you about it. And if you have a case that you want him to work with you with, he's always been very willing to help other doctors, to help people. This is his mission now. He's got 3 clinics, one in Kansas City, which you could probably meet with him, the person said they were from Kansas City. He's got one there, and he's got one in Tampa area, and then he's got one in Naples. That he goes in, he just does the neurocare there, and he has other people doing the therapies when he's gone, but he just goes in for a day or 2 every week and does the examinations and sets up the protocols for therapy. Most of his therapy, by the way, besides the adjustment, takes somebody live, but most of the therapy besides the adjustment is all done by staff. It doesn't have to be a professional. You don't have to have a license to do this. You can just have people doing the therapy.